Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Adventure in the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is a fantastic episode because Born the Mothership is Chris Michael. He's the creator, artist, and writer behind Caffeinated Chaos, which is now on Kickstarter. Now come join us as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Michael. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Thanks for having me. Always love being here.
Totally my pleasure. Like I said, you're a returning champion. You've been here before.
Returning champion. I love it.
So you're now in your 6th issue of Crit. What have you learned about the craft, yourself, and the characters during this journey?
Oh, the craft of making comic books is not for everybody. I've learned that. It is like trial by fire every single time. Every single book, you go in, with this plan and you're like, this is going to be awesome. You get into it and you're like, man, is this going to be that great? And then you get through with it and you're really happy. And then at the end, you're like, oh, I can't beat this. It's like the same. Every time I go to a book, that's literally the same process I have because, my writing style is different from everybody else. Mine's based off of my D&D game. So I'm always excited to get into it because it brings back those memories from that session. So I'm really excited. And then as I'm getting into it, I'm like, oh man, will this end as powerful as the last one? Does it have the staying power? And, we've done, 0 through 5, every single book just hit hard at the end. And so when I started book 6, I'm over here like, oh man, am I going to do it? And I'm halfway through and I'm already like, how can I live up to this book now? Because this book's already better than the last book. And I'm really glad that people see that too. A lot of the feedback I've gotten from my readers is I give them the truth. My book is fun, and everybody that's come back has been the same way. Like, you said your book was fun. It's fun. You didn't lie to me. So that's good. The journey itself it's been a challenge. I didn't know anything about indie comics. I didn't know anything about drawing. I didn't know anything about anything to do with what I'm doing. I kind of just said I'm going to do it. And I think we found a formula that works. I think that I've learned more about myself in this whole journey I was talking the other day with somebody about the artistic side and how when I started, if you pick up book 1, I taught myself how to do that. Like a couple months prior to putting that book out, I was drawing stick figures. So to go from never drawing anything comic book related to now all of a sudden putting out issue after issue after issue, I'm very proud. I have not been able to look back in the past at all. I've always been looking forward. And before I started this book, I looked back and I said, wow, I'm part of this great community. I have, 6 books under my belt. I'm about to release my 7th in 2 years. And that in itself, and this, being that I'm self-published, right? I feel like that in itself is something I should be really proud of. And I'm really happy that we funded in 16 minutes. Most of those people are returning backers, which is even better because that means I've put out something that people want to read. So thank you for everything you've done. Thank every person that has read Crit and come back or shared the campaign or even just said, hey, it's a fun ride. It keeps it going. And yeah, I'm proud to be where I'm at, to be honest.
Well, I'm proud to be a backer. I backed during that first hour, so thank you for bringing that.
Got us over that hump like real quick. That was amazing.
I would say that the live shows are really fantastic. You guys put on a good show. You were there. Another guest, Dan Price, was part of it as well. And you guys put together a great show together. And there was a lot of people. I think you guys had at one point 33, 34 people on in the chat. It was hopping.
Yeah, and that was a really cool thing that we did. Like, I talked to him about this prior. We both had the same launch date, and there's so many books that launch in October, and it's called the Gauntlet, right? Like, everybody calls October the Gauntlet because it's a really busy month. It's the first month, the first quarter. It's usually the month everyone wants to put their books on because November, December are scary. And we could have easily tried to divide our fan base. And I was like, hey, man, let's do something together. And he loved it. We planned it out and we had all these different guests pop on. We had some really awesome people that would just pop in and talk about their books. And I think we made it more even about the community than just us, which helped because people were coming on excited to talk about their project with us and then let us kind of, talk about ours as well. So we were giving them viewership of our fan base. And then they were bringing their own in at the same time. And it was this really big, like community driven event. It wasn't just, one of us hosting an event, right? Where we would just pull in our own viewers. And I think that really says a lot to the community that we need to do more stuff like that. We're all fighting for the same views. If we just got those views together, Dan and I showed what that does because in an hour we raised, actually within 30 minutes, I think we raised what, $3,000 between like 1,500 for me, 1,500 for him. And so that I think speaks a lot to our community, to our viewers that we each individually have, and the people that want to read our books. If we lift each other up, we're going to do better than putting the other one down to try and step up. Dan and I have really, I feel like we've done something that I haven't seen before, which is freaking awesome.
So how can we get the indie community become tighter?
It takes us putting our egos away for a little bit, to be frank. We all have, I come from music, right? So in music, it's very similar, especially say back when I was playing music, it was the MySpace days. And on MySpace, you were always fighting for everyone to listen to your song. You're promoting your song, your song, your song. Some of the best experiences I had were where us and like another band were promoting each other. And then we just had a group fan base. People would come to see our shows. And I go into this because we just played a reunion show after 15 years. And we played with a lot of those same bands. And people were coming saying, I had to come because this band, this band, this band were playing. And I remember seeing them every weekend. Those were the bands I went to see. So if we did that in the community of indie, it's similar. It's like, oh yeah, I read this book, this book, this book, because they all, if we promote it, we all like it, right? I don't think we would associate with people that, or try to promote things that maybe weren't good. I'm being real as a creator. I think about my brand and say like Dan, I'll use Dan because we're in the same circle, but he's not in like my SSB circle, right? So it's one thing for me to promote my Savage Sandbox books because we're all published together. But Dan not being part of our group, I'm still promoting him.
Yeah.
I'm still sharing his stuff. I'm still raising him up. And I have people that are like, hey, what's this book about? And then they come back to me, oh, that's an awesome book, right? So they know, hey, Chris is going to tell us something good. If we all did that and we banded together the groups of indie comics that have good stories. And that's the scary thing about indie too is, and I guess I have to say this, not everybody needs to be doing a book. Okay. Some of us need to refine that craft a little bit. Not saying you don't need to put your stuff out there. I'm saying there's other places. If you can't fulfill your book, that's one of the biggest fears on Kickstarter is backing someone and not getting your book fulfilled. Then why don't you just release it digitally? If you can actually get the artwork done, throw it up and get a digital fan base. If you can't afford a great artist, well, get one that you can afford and start from the bottom, or do what I did and just wing it and figure it out as you go. The indie community needs some refining. Outside looking in, 2020, we were all bored. We had nothing to do. We were like, cool, we're going to make comic books. None of us knew what it was to make a comic. We just said, oh, there's this person, slowly but surely it started to trickle in. By 2021, everybody was making books. I couldn't even hire an artist anymore because they were all making their own books. And not that all of them were bad, some of them were okay, some of them were great. But again, we get into that conundrum of not every artist is a storyteller, not every storyteller is an artist, right? So Now we're in 2022 and we're really starting to see the people that could survive that. We're going back to work. We don't have all the time we used to have to make books. Some of us have fulfilled a book and been like, oh man, that's hard. You know, oh, I had to go to the post office 3 times and I spent all this extra money because I didn't know how to price this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mistakes that go into it. And if you're not prepared for that, it's tough. And if you don't have, I'm blessed to have the support system I have in my house. I'm blessed to have, I work 2 full-time jobs. So if I take a little bit of a hit on a Kickstarter or if I misprice something, my wife's not too thrilled, but we can at least absorb that on the back end and hopefully make up for it in the next Kickstarter. But not everybody has that cushion. You know, I don't want to speak for everybody else's budget, but I've seen people that have put a $500 goal and they're giving out free shipping on a $3 book, okay, or $5 book, whatever they're you know, I've looked at the pricing and I'm like, how do you make that work? And I might know a little bit more about them, their personal lives, and I know that they don't have a ton of money. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, logistically, you're going to go broke trying to fulfill this, right? And they don't listen, and then they don't come back with another book, or they just disappear completely. And you know why? Because they didn't think it out. So I think and nobody tells them this, right? Like, and I don't know if it's on us or them, if they didn't ask for the help first or what the situation might be, but that person is no longer around, right? And that hurts us. That hurts the community. Every time we don't fulfill a book, that hurts the community. We need to hold each other accountable. If there's a creator in your circle that has a Kickstarter that's been out for a year and they didn't fulfill, there's no updates, give them a poke. Hey man, I hope everything's doing okay. Like, you know, can I make an update for you? I've seen people do that where they'll go on to theirs and be like, hey, I spoke to this person who created this book. They're really trying, you know. We need to stop pushing each other down. I've seen that too. I saw last year a small group of creators that said everybody else was their competition. And I said, that's the wrong mentality. The only competition that anybody should have is yourself. I think that if we saw it that way and didn't see like Dan and I don't see Dan as competition. Dan doesn't see me as competition. He has a book about Bigfoot, you know, like we're in 2 different realms. I have a book about my dumb friends playing D&D, right? Like there's no competition there whatsoever. It's not like he's Bigfoot knows karate and I'm like Bigfoot knows jujitsu, right? Like there's no competition. And I think we as a community need to see that. I think we as a community need to praise each other for the work we do. And if we're trying to work on a project, first ask someone that knows what they're doing, and that person that knows what they're doing has to give that person solid feedback. Because if you allow a creator to fail, you're almost as bad, if not worse, than that creator for not doing the right homework. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%.
Because we use Kickstarter, and Kickstarter now becomes a publisher, right? Kickstarter arguably is like the largest comic book publisher there is, because how many comics come out of there? There's more money raised for comics on Kickstarter than there are put into comic book stores. Like billions and billions of dollars go into this big money thing of comics, and a lot of it comes from Kickstarter because all the like booms on there. You got everybody with a book now is going to Kickstarter, which is great, or Indiegogo, whatever you decide to use. But we're not doing justice to our groups if we're allowing people to fail, or you know, we're letting them go years without fulfillment and not holding them accountable. That's going to make it harder for that first time publisher to put a book out, because now we're in 2022 and I do a lot. I research everything. I talk to people, I ask questions, and the number one thing I get is, well, I'm glad you're on book 7. Yeah, me too. No, I'm glad you're on book 7 because that means you actually fulfilled your last few books. And people are researching you now on Kickstarter. They go and look at you and they look at your website. I know a few of the, because when I first started, I paid for like a list of the super backers. And I did that whole like the, send me $20 and I'll promote your Kickstarter. Well, one of the idiots sent me like this list and of everyone they marketed to. And I don't know if they just weren't that great of a marketing person, but they literally sent me their entire spreadsheet of people. And I just saved it. I was like, you just sent me like 5,000 contacts. I don't need you. You just made yourself obsolete. But instead of marketing those people, I actually sent them messages like, hey, as a first time creator, I'm curious what draws you to a comic book so I can do it right. And I had a bunch of them that told me to screw myself. How'd you get my email? But I did have a few of them that have gotten back to me and actually backed my book and talked to me on a business level. And these are super backers, literally people that have money that just throw it at comic books. And they're like, the further we get out of this, like 2020 era of everybody putting out books, we're in this new age where cost is going up, paper shortages, all these trials that creators go through, we're seeing more and more fail to come through. And now these people who used to just get excited about the content they saw on a page, now they're researching you as an individual, right? And we're seeing more of these personalities come out that maybe aren't great for our community either. And so they're researching you. So just keep all that stuff in mind, because we're all part of the same community, whether your political leanings or any different way, comic books and fiction and fantasy are supposed to be an escape. So just keep it as an escape, if your book's a political book, then it's a political book, but don't mix all that stuff together. There's just so much going on. I think that it's a loaded question, Jeff. What do we do to bring the community? There's so many things, but first and foremost, we need to build each other up, not break each other down, and we need to hold each other accountable. Those are the things I think.
Now, one very interesting thing that you're doing as well as part of learning the industry and learning about your comic book and everything is that you used to be only the writer and the penciler for the series, but now you've increased yourself to a colorist as well. So what led to that decision to move on to add yourself yet another duty to this world of comic book? And how difficult is it to wear pretty much every single hat you can think of?
There's a couple things. For one, I've always wanted to color. Okay. Since day one, I wanted to color my own book. I decided against it because this is where I hold myself accountable. I wanted to give the best possible product to people if I'm asking for money. If I am going and saying, buy my book, right? I'm asking you to put money into something you have no investment in. I don't want to give you 50% of my penciling, 50% of my coloring. I want to give you 100% of something. And I was just learning, and I said, I'm going to get as good as I can on inks and lines, and I'm going to get somebody that knows how to color to make this look good. Because if I divide my attention, you're getting 50% and 50%. I've done 6 books in this series from start to finish. And you've probably heard this story. I say this all the time. When I started, my wife ripped apart my artwork over and over and over again. And she would erase things. She would circle things. She would cross things out. You're wrong here. This is wrong. This is wrong. She's a phenomenal artist, and I took every bit of criticism in stride. End of book 4, about halfway through, she looks at me and says, I don't think I need to critique you anymore. You're fine. Book 5, she made like two adjustments to the entire book. And that was a 60-page book, 2 adjustments. So I said, I think on the next book, I've got the line work down, right? I feel confident in my line work. Let me try coloring. That's the long version. The other part was I went pretty negative on my last campaign financially, only because printing costs went up, shipping costs went up from the time I priced it to the time I actually fulfilled everything. And the design on the figure was about $300 to $400 outside my budget because the printer screwed up. So I paid for their mess up, had to pay another designer to actually design the thing again. And all those things combined, I went negative about $1,200, even
Jesus.
after making, almost 5,000. Um, and we did my taxes, and my wife was like, "Hey, next Kickstarter, we need to figure something out." And I was like, "Well, I'm at a point now where I can color." And again, I have a resource in my house of a phenomenal artist. So I sat down for about a week before I even started this next book. And I started drawing my own work and I started coloring my own work. And I got with Robert Nix, who does a lot of my like funny artwork. He does the drunk cat. He did the cat playing D&D. He does all of like the really fun stuff. And I said, I love his coloring style because it's fun, it's simple, but it's detailed and it's fun. And I said, that's kind of what I want my style to be because that's where my book is. And I did a lesson with him. I took that lesson, I practiced, I went back to my wife. She gave me some critiques, and I said, cool, let me show this to the guys. So I go in my group chat, and I think everybody in indie comics needs a group chat full of creators that aren't afraid to tell you that you suck. And so I start sending artwork in there that I'd colored, and I actually sent it to Dan too. And I said, hey, this is some artwork that like preliminary stuff for the next book. I didn't tell them who colored it. And I said, what do you guys think of the coloring? That's it. They all thought that my old colors did it. They're like, oh yeah, Chris did a great job on that. And I said, no, I did this. And they were like, really? That looks like really good. And I was like, okay, cool. And I said, so if I do an entire book like this, is it gonna take away from my brand? Like, am I hurting my brand by moving to this? And they're like, no, actually, it's really good. And then I showed it to my D&D group, and I said, hey, what do you guys think? And they're like, actually, I really like that. Your shading, it matches our tone a little bit more. And so I had all this positive feedback come to me. And then I said to my wife, I'm like, so remember in December and January, I'm coloring, therefore you're my editor. And she said that was fine because I love Cristiano. He's great, but I'm not going to ask him to work for less money because I respect him and I respect his talent. Um, so I took this over to hopefully recoup some of that money. Also, it's a pride thing. I finally get to have a book from start to finish. Everything you read on the interior is me, from the inks to the lettering. Every piece is me, and you get to see my characters level up book to book, but now you get to see me level up even more. And so I know that I know I get a little bit passionate and long-winded about this stuff, but everyone that reads my book needs to know they're getting 100% of me in every book.
We've been talking a lot about the art and the coloring, but I think what I like the best is the writing, because you had some wonderful banter in this book. Issue 5 has some great scenes between Boulder, Caliber, and the henchman. Issue 5 about when they're trying to sneak their way into the headquarters. It really is funny. I mean, it's kind of silly, but it's funny and it works. So, how has your skill developed as a writer?
I attribute all of the writing to a team setting. We are more like a TV show writing than we are a comic book or a book. With most books, you have a writer, you have an editing team, and maybe someone who helps the writer out. I know quite a few writers, and most of them are the core element in their writing. Way our book runs, everything's pre-done because it's recorded. But all those game sessions that are recorded, I come to the table with the setting, and they really write the story because it's reactionary. They tell what they're doing, and then I react to what they're doing, and it's this big conglomerate story. You don't really get that anywhere else. And the more interviews I do about Crit, the more I realize how unique our style is.
Mm.
Every character is written by the player. Also, every character is based off them in real life. So it's really easy for them to write that. You are Boulder, you have this power, and you are in this situation. How do you react? There you go. So the writing is so organic, and I give them a chance at the end, right? So when I go into this writing session, my form of writing is I listen to 4 to 6 hours of us playing D&D, and I listen to it for a week, and I make notes and I scratch down these like must keep ideas, and this can go away, or we might want to tweak this a little bit. This is a little bit weak. and I scripted out like a really rough script and storyboard it, and I sent it to him. And I'll get some critiques on the flow, like, hey, we don't even come back to this piece ever again. Like this disappears after this game, so let's remove that. Um, hey, we've already done, like, it's D&D. We might get repetitive. We've done this before. Let's change it up a little bit. And so we'll storyboard out according to how we feel it should flow, and we'll keep the dialogue as a placeholder. Get it all done. Artwork's done. We have a Discord session where we go page by page, panel by panel, and the people that are in that panel read their dialogue, and we all listen and we give feedback. Okay, so you've said this, maybe you said it before, right? We avoid repetition, and we make sure that the dialogue in that panel for that character comes from that person's mouth. That way we know how, like, everybody says things different. And if you read, like, Spectre has a unique way of saying things. I was told the other day, Boulder has some of the most like cringe moments because he tries so hard. But that's how he wants the character. So that's how he plays the character. But that is the writing at its core. It's a little bit more complicated because there's more moving parts. But to us, it's just so much easier because all we're doing is writing our character. Caliber, Brad, what do you say here? Something snarky. Like, I'll even put in there if he like didn't say something but I want him to, I'm like, Caliber says something snarky, and I'll call him and say, hey, I need you to come up with something snarky real quick. Here's your setting. And he'll say it, and I'm like, cool, that's what goes there. It keeps it fun, it keeps it unique, and at the core of it, I just really want it to have this organic feel.
So I think one of the coolest characters, especially visually, is Smitty the cat. So where did he come from?
This guy, fellow guy. Yeah, I gotta say, there's two cool things about my comic book: having my own stuffed cat and having my cat on an energy drink. So Samedi is actually a punishment to one of my characters. Austin is a DM in his own games, and he knows D&D very well. When he built his character, he built it after a warlock wizard like base, and he knew he had a deity that he could call upon in his power set. And so he gave me so many different ideas. He was trying to be just more overpowered than he should have been. And I said, okay, you can have this all-powerful godlike thing that boosts your power, that gives you different abilities, yada yada yada, but it's a cat. And I'm like, in real life, you're allergic to cats, and you're allergic to this one, so if he's out too long, you take negatives. And I said, on top of it, he's a cat. Everybody that has a cat knows you can't tell a cat what to do. A cat's going to be a dick no matter what. I love my cat. My cat's one of my best friends. He literally will follow me in my house. He will wait for me to get home. Love the cat to death. He's still a dick. If I don't let him out, he throws up on my floor. Like, cats are just, they are their own unique animals. So that's how that whole character came about. And I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of Alice in Wonderland. And so it's a mix of the Mad Hatter with the
Cheshire Cat.
Cheshire Cat, who actually had a tattoo on my calf, the most painful tattoo I've ever gotten. And I threw a little bit of Cat in the Hat in there too, just from the rhyming. So it's like a mix of all those things. And I think it's either book 2 or book 3, he breaks the rhyme for a minute, and he like stop, and the dialogue, he doesn't rhyme, and Austin's like, oh, you don't have to rhyme. He's like, damn it. Like, he does it just to mess with him. And so that character exists because I wanted to mess with a player, and I made it.
That's awesome. So in the upcoming issue of Crit, you mentioned a little bit of the energy drink. The characters of Crit are opening up their own mobile coffee shop called the Black Cat Coffee.
Yep.
So which of the team has the best business sense, and can these guys really be trusted with a functional business?
So interestingly enough, Boulder is the face. He is the accountant. He is the guy that holds them accountable to these budgets and things. Because in game, they were like, well, if we start a business, who's in charge of the money? Because we can't trust Spectre. Spectre's idea for the business, right? Spectre is the marketing and sales guy. He's the one that comes up with all the ideas. Who's going to be the money guy? Because most businesses fail because they have bad money guys. And so Boulder's the money guy, and he actually has like he's been in many leadership roles in his life. So everyone was like, yeah, you can do that. But they hate him because they're like, hey, we want to buy this. He's like, no, not in the budget. I want this new piece of armor. Nope, you're not getting it. Sorry. Like, go loot something and we'll talk. He does a really good job. The problem that they run into is that Caliber doesn't really want to be a sales guy. And they put him as like the head barista. So Caliber also doesn't believe in like, you know, those frou-frou drinks. So everyone gets black coffee. If you order a mochaccino, black coffee. There's actually a line in the book. The guy's like, I ordered like, it's some fancy drink that this guy ordered. And it's one of the previous backers. He gets to have this spot as an NPC. And I was the DM and I'm like, and I literally Googled on Starbucks, I like the most complicated drink name I could think of. And I said, I ordered this. And in game, like he looks at me and goes, I don't think you get this. I serve black coffee. You get caffeinated decaf. If you want anything else, there's milk and sugar at the end of the bar. And so they get into this argument about it, and this happened all at the table. They're like, dude, you're gonna give us bad Google reviews. If we have bad Google reviews, we won't make money. And I shit you not, this was great. He looks at everybody, he goes, you're yelling at me for giving bad customer service when we literally have said multiple times the cat is making coffee. Like, don't you think OSHA's going to have a problem with this? So in the book, you actually see him say that, and then he points at the coffee machine. There's a cat, a chameleon, and an owl all making coffee, and they're like, I didn't do anything.
That's awesome. The other thing that I think the most impressive thing, and I don't think I've ever seen it before in any Kickstarter campaign ever, Crit has energy drinks. You actually made Crit energy drinks. How the bleep did you come away with energy drinks? I mean,
where's my camera? I have my own branded, named website on it and everything.
What the hell happened?
So when I was promoting the last book, they asked me what I wanted in the future. And I said I wanted my own energy drink. Since we played this actual campaign that we're putting into book form right now, I said I wanted an energy drink. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to figure it out, as most things in my life. And I was on a show with Sear Nova, and I mentioned it, and they said, well, look up white label. Well, very, very expensive, because with white label, they still want you to create your own flavors, and it's like you have to spend $5,000 to create a flavor. So that put me down a rabbit hole. When I was touring with my band, we had played Warped Tour, and our record label owner we got bought by Sony. And so he used some of that money for promotion, and he had promotional energy drinks, because we were endorsed by Rockstar, but we couldn't get Rockstar to do what he wanted. So he found a company that he got to pick the flavor, and he put his own label on it. And I remembered this, and I was like, let me call Tommy real quick. So I called my old record label owner, and I was like, hey, dude, I know it's been like 15 years. I'm glad you still have the same phone number. I was like crossing fingers, and luckily he did, even though he's like super famous now and whatever. But I was like, hey, dude, so quick question. I make comic books now, and I want to have an energy drink. And I remember we did this. And he was like, oh, that's kind of cool, because I just bought a comic book shop. So we started talking about that, and I'm going to go do a signing there and do some cool stuff there. But I was like, where did you get that? I know it was locally owned in North Carolina. And he said, oh, and he gave me the company. They actually brew a lot of beer. They have a brewing company, and they do their own packaging. And he said, just call them up, tell them I sent you. They have a big website now. I went through the whole process, and within 2 months, I was filling out forms and ordering my energy drinks. It was, I make it sound simple. It was kind of complicated, matching up with their criteria. The biggest problem that we ran into was I have no sense of taste. Like, I can't taste anything. So they send me these samples. They're like, tell me which one you like, or if you want to mix them, we can do that too. So I had the guys come down for my birthday, and we played D&D, and I cornered them and said, okay, you're trying the energy drinks because I can't. So we did blind taste tests with shot glasses, well, two of them don't drink energy drinks at all. They don't really like the taste. And they were like, well, I'm going to be biased because I really hate energy drinks. So we'll see. It was Caliber and Kid. And they both were like, you know what? We don't really like energy drinks, but this one is good. And they both picked the same one. And they didn't know which one they were picking. Everybody picked the sugar-free version. And I asked my wife when it came in, I said, try it. And she's like, it's kind of like a lime Rockstar meets Red Bull. So it's got like a lime, kind of like soury taste mixed with Red Bull Rockstar. And it's a light flavor. So it's not really heavy, no bite to it. So everyone that's tried it's liked it. I'm happy with it. I can't taste it. I've drank 3 of them. They're really good. So they keep me going.
That is awesome. Like I said, that must be the craziest reward tier I think I've ever seen. So what tier is that reward?
That is, well, so you can do it as an add-on. I did add it in there as an add-on for anyone that wanted to add it to like a smaller tier, because it is a $30 item. But with the 125 tier, you get the energy drinks, you get an aluminum cover. There's only 8 of those ever made now, so only 8 people get the aluminum covers. You get all 4 books, you get the stickers, the posters, everything in the campaign is pretty much there with that 125. And you get a whole case, 12 cans of 12 ounces of Caffeinated Chaos.
That is absolutely awesome. I mean, I think the coolest thing about you and your Kickstarter is that you do seem to be upping yourself every single time, which is awesome. And the Kickstarter campaign that you set up is beautiful to look at. I mean, you did a wonderful job in how you set it all up. I mean, is that something that's self-taught? I mean, did you get design help?
Well, I used a program called Canva. It's a website, but I actually have a degree in digital marketing. So my actual college degree is communication and marketing. So, and then I did go to school. I dropped out of college my first few years, but I went for visual design to begin with. So I have 2 years of visual design, 4 years of communication, and then 2 years of marketing. And so, yeah, I'm finally using the degrees I paid like $80,000 for and still paying for. Yeah, that's my background, is I have a lot of college debt for no reason. But yeah, so that's where I learned how to do most of that stuff. But I grew up, my mom was a set designer for Broadway, and my dad is a classically trained artist. So I grew up around very artistically inclined people. So some of it's natural, other parts of it are taught over years of being in school. And the only reason I even really wanted to get into graphic design stuff was because I wanted to make t-shirts for my band. Like, I went back to school, I was like, cool, I'll do graphic design, like visual design, so I can make cool t-shirts. That was the plan. And now I'm doing it for my comic book.
That's awesome. So your comic book has already hit a stretch goal. Which stretch goals are ahead of us right now? Which ones are coming up?
We have stickers and I think coasters or pins. We've got collector cards. I always do collector cards. I was more excited to make collector cards than I was a comic book. As a kid, I was really, really poor, and it was easier to get collector cards and learn about characters than it was to read comic books all the time. And there was so many comics and so many characters. When I started collecting the cards, I'm like, oh man, I love this guy's power or his design, right? And like, that became my favorite character when I was like 6, because I liked the design. And so when we started the comic book, the first thing people said was like, what are you excited for? I said, collector cards. One day we will have collector cards. So that's awesome. A stretch goal. And we are doing, again on this campaign, it started last time, the next episode of Mr. Wizard and Friends, which exists as a TV show within Crit. We release it in 4-page increments, and it is like small little episodes that happen within the story. It's also based off a D&D campaign that we played, so it's more off the rails than this campaign is, so it's much more chaotic. I mean, if you read the last 4 pages in the first one, you know that it's full of just utter stupidity. Yeah, that somebody said, they're like, wow, in 4 pages you had the biggest twist ever. Like they go to infiltrate a base, they kill everybody in it, and then they find out, oh, that was meant for us. This was supposed to be our crew and our base, and we just murdered everybody. Oh, and Kanye West is the guy that runs the entire show. So while on the test, I had to use I had to switch his name up a little bit for it, but in the game it was the real Kanye, or Ye as he goes by now.
That's awesome. I mean, like I said, your campaign is absolutely freaking killing it. How long does it run till, and what's next for Crit?
So this one runs till November 11th. We as of today of filming with you, we are at 1 week exactly. I think actually right now we are literally at the 1 week mark. And sorry, I missed what's next for Crit.
Yeah.
So this book will end on a cliffhanger. Just because when I listened to it, we got to the end of the campaign and everyone had to go. We left on a cliffhanger for a reason. So, and there's some dark stuff that happens at the end of the book. Big explosion. Somebody might die. We don't know yet. We find out the next book. In the next book, I'm still tentatively working on the title, but I think it's called Arachnophobia. So we're going to fight some robot spiders and some other crazy things in the next book. But I think that's where we're going after I mean, to be frank, I actually know the entire story because we are at like the very end of Crit now as far as the writing process and D&D game goes. We've been playing for 4 years. You talk to anybody that plays D&D with a bunch of 40-year-old men, 4 years in the same game is a feat by itself. So we're actually excited to close this Crit campaign out, because the entire thing, from start to finish, Crit is supposed to end with some big world-changing events that leave our world that we know it in a very Dungeons and Dragons setting where monsters and beings with powers are normal. Okay. And we're going to start a new campaign with new characters, and my guys are going to write a whole new story. It'll be in the same world as Crit, but not like the same team. But the hope is after we're done, so like probably this is like a 5-year goal, we finish the comic book and then we release the game. So the version of the D&D version that we've created, we're going to release that. And I want to beef up our website enough to where people can host their own D&D games on our website and submit their campaigns to us. And maybe your one-shot campaign or your D&D crew will then be accepted into the Crit universe, and we can make them canonical. And maybe and there's rights things involved, and there's a lot of paperwork involved for this, but maybe we can bring your campaign to life in a 4 to 6 issue arc and allow people. And this is where my super nerd comes in. I really wanted to do like a George Lucas. He created Star Wars, and then all these writers came in and got to play in his sandbox and created some characters that have everlasting effects on the entire universe of Star Wars. Like Thrawn, for instance, and all these characters you see, they're not all brainchildren of Lucas. They were writers that came in and said, hey, I had this idea. And they pitched to him, they made a book, and now 20 years later, we're seeing them come to life. I'm hoping that I can create something to where people enjoy the world we've created so much that they create their own stuff within our world, and we can bring it to life for them. I want to be able to share the energy. We just need to get there first so we can give you this world to play in.
Well, that sounds absolutely awesome. I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Especially we can't just jump in time another 5 years and see where you're at, where you are.
I mean, I'm going on 40. I'll tell you what, I thought I was 30 yesterday. So
well, Mr. Michael, it's been a total pleasure to talk with you, sir. And I can't wait to see what Crit 7 now looks like.
Oh, you will, because I'll be having you help me with marketing on that too.
Looking forward to it, sir.
Next year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. You too.